The music stopped for a second as if even the piano had held its breath. In the center of the glass hall, beneath chandeliers that shone like bottled stars, a black waitress firmly held the trembling hands of a young man in a wheelchair. "Trust," she whispered. And when he stood up, even if only for moments, their eyes collided. The billionaire fathers, who had always wanted him hidden, and the entire cities, invited to his grand celebration. It was in that instant that the life of a powerful man began to crumble, and finally make sense. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. New York wore its lights like jewels. From the 54th floor, the Langford Tower reflected the entire city, and inside, the main hall looked like a living museum. Marble walls, white orchid arrangements, waiters gliding with crystal trays. It was Langford Night, the annual event where Victor Langford, tech tycoon, paraded million-dollar donations, inspiring speeches, and perfect smiles for the cameras. But away from the lenses, his smile was something else. "Don't cause me trouble tonight," Victor said without looking at his son. Noah, 24, with delicate hands and ocean-colored eyes, adjusted himself in his motorized wheelchair. He had been left partially paralyzed after an accident in his teens. Yet what hurt most was not his body. It was the silence his father imposed. "I just came to keep you company," Noah murmured. "Company, yes. Display, no. Remember, we are the brand. Do what you must. Smile, wave, and stay discreet." Discreet, a word sharp as a knife. To Victor, discreet always meant invisible. Guests arrived in waves: politicians, investors, celebrities, air kisses, polished laughter, beautiful words wrapped in expensive hypocrisy. Victor moved like a king certain of his crown. Saxophones filled the air, and among the immaculate tables and rows of glasses moved Maya Carter, the young black waitress with attentive eyes and quick steps, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. "You, from the kitchen to here, watch the Persian carpet," whispered her white supervisor, not bothering to look at her. "Yes, ma'am." Maya forced a polite smile, the smile of someone who has learned to shrink herself to fit where she doesn't belong. By day she cared for the elderly. By night she carried trays at events like this. In her bag she kept a little notebook filled with verses of faith like matches to light whenever the world grew dark. "God does not abandon the righteous." She reread it sometimes, just to remind herself that dignity had an owner. Across the room, Victor raised his hand. A row of cameras turned instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Tonight we celebrate innovation, courage, and the future we are building," he proclaimed with his trained voice. Applause, flashes, champagne. Noah, 2 steps behind his father, tried to match a smile. A robust investor with a red tie approached. "Victor, wonderful night. And this must be—" "My son," Victor cut in. "Noah." "Ah, yes, of course. Brave of you to bring him." The word brave came out low, as if commenting on the weather. Victor's face stiffened into a fake smile. In the Langford family, even weaknesses become trophies. Noah swallowed hard. The investor changed the subject. Victor laughed loudly and conversation flowed as if nothing had been said. The music rose. A group of socialites discussed an actress's dress. Passing with her tray, Maya caught the scene. The son diminished, the father exalted, a wound bleeding only on the inside. "Excuse me," she offered a glass to Noah, who thanked her with a shy nod. "Thank you." "It's non-alcoholic," she added, noticing his father's watchful eye. Victor's glance was cold, as if to ask, "Who gave you the right to speak?" Maya moved on. On stage, the master of ceremonies announced a philanthropy award. Victor stepped up once again, reciting big numbers and heartwarming stories of hospitals that had received his donations. The audience was touched. There was something almost sacred about how money, in that room, seemed to wash away all sins. But God, who sees what is hidden, does not trade in applause. "Father," Noah whispered, as they came down from the stage, "may I Sit closer to the band. I like to hear the piano. As long as you don't block the photographers. Don't draw attention, Noah, please. The word please carried no kindness, just another straitjacket disguised as etiquette. Noah moved toward the piano. The musician played a melody so old it struck his heart like a memory. His mother used to sing it while cooking before she left this world too soon. His chest loosened. The rhythm seemed to invite him to move his fingers, then his shoulders. No one noticed. Or no one cared to. Maya noticed. She was nearby, collecting empty glasses, when two men brushed past Noah's chair impatiently. "Careful there, champ," one muttered, as if Noah's body were in the way of the champagne glasses. Noah smiled faintly, apologizing for existing. Maya set her tray on a table. She crouched slightly by the chair, not like someone addressing a patient, but to meet his eyes. "That's a beautiful song," she said. Noah was startled to be seen. "My mother liked it. I like it too." "I like the way your fingers dance with the piano," she remarked, noticing his rhythm on the chair's armrest. "It's not real dancing. Every dance starts that way, inside." Before he could answer, Victor's voice sliced the air from across the hall. "Noah, come. Photo with the Senate team." The photographer was already arranging the group. Victor's expression demanded urgency. Noah turned his chair, obedient. Maya rose and picked up her tray. "Take your time," she said softly, almost like a blessing. Noah wanted to reply, but the distance swallowed the moment. In the photo, Victor placed his hand on the back of Noah's chair with the delicacy of someone touching an expensive object. "Posture," he whispered through clenched lips. Click, click, click. "Perfect," the photographer praised. "Mr. Langford, your family is inspiring." Victor smiled, pleased with the compliment. Noah withered inside, invisible again. Minutes later, a small incident. A guest brushed against a tray, a glass tipped, champagne spilling onto the marble. The supervisor spun toward Maya, sharp as a whip. "Eyes open, this isn't your family's dinner table." "I'll clean it right away," Maya replied quickly, cloth in hand. A group nearby chuckled. "These events always come with a little entertainment," one mocked. Victor passed nearby, heard the remark, glanced at the scene, and walked on. Not my problem, he thought. In his world, problems only existed if they made the press. Noah saw it, and somehow it hurt him as if the humiliation were his own. The music called to him again. "Move what you can." He inhaled. He looked at the piano. He looked at Maya, wringing the cloth with silent dignity. And he wished for something he couldn't name yet, but it burned inside like a prayer. Victor climbed the stage again for the night's main announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, Langford Tech is launching a new fund to support young people with special needs." The word caught in his throat. Young people with challenges. More applause, more cameras. Noah below heard the word special like a recipe gone wrong. His father spoke of inclusion as though it were a product. Maya, farther back, bit her tongue to keep from asking, "And what greater challenge exists than loving your own child?" The speech ended. The band began a ballad. Light softened, masks loosened, truth slipping out through the eyes. Victor descended amid waves of compliments. Brilliant, Victor. Visionary. Breathtaking. As he passed the piano, Victor noticed Noah stopped there again, watching the musician. His temple vein pulsed. "Noah," he hissed, low and sharp. "Don't make me repeat myself. This is a business event. You want to dance? Dance in your room." Noah recoiled, as if struck by an invisible hand. "I'm sorry. Sorry." The boy apologizing for feeling. Maya, only a few steps away, breathed deeply. It wasn't her family, wasn't her boss, but it was her conscience. "God, give him a chance," she prayed, not demanding, but trusting. And so, under expensive chandeliers and empty words, the seed was planted. The music, stubborn, continued. The piano called again. A young man's heart answered, and the world of a billionaire, without knowing it, had just begun to crack. Exactly where it hurt the most, his pride. The ballroom glowed brighter as the night deepened. Laughter rose in waves, champagne glasses chimed like tiny bells, and conversations sparkled with vanity. The air carried the scent of roses and expensive perfume, a perfume so thick it almost tried to erase the faint aroma of sweat from those who served. Maya balanced her tray, weaving between tables covered in silk and silver. She knew the rhythm by heart. Keep your head lowered, your smile ready, and your pace graceful enough not to be noticed. Because being noticed in a place like this never meant something good. "Another bottle for table 12, barked the supervisor, pointing without looking. "Yes, ma'am." Maya's reply was calm, though her arms ached from hours of lifting. At table 12 sat a group of socialites draped in jewels. Their laughter was loud, careless, the kind of laughter that filled the air with superiority. "Here you go," Maya said softly, pouring champagne. One of the women, her diamonds flashing, glanced at Maya's skin before turning back to her friends. "It's always the same, isn't it? They hire anyone these days, at least she's quick." The table chuckled. Maya pretended not to hear. She steadied her hands, even as her chest tightened. She had learned to build walls inside her, tall enough to block the insults but thin enough to let dignity breathe. "Thank you, ma'am," she said with a faint smile. The woman ignored her, already telling a story about a shopping trip to Paris. To them, Maya was no more than a shadow carrying liquid gold in fragile glasses. Across the room, Noah noticed. He was watching more than he should, listening more than he dared. The way the guests dismissed Maya reminded him of how his father dismissed him. Different stories, same wound. Victor, of course, noticed nothing, or chose not to. He was too busy shaking hands with a senator, his laughter booming, his pride swelling. Maya moved to the next table. She offered champagne to two men in tailored suits. One of them took a glass without even glancing at her. The other leaned close as if to whisper a joke, but said it loud enough for her to hear. "Careful, or she'll spill it on your Armani." The men laughed. Maya's face stayed composed, but her soul whispered, "Lord, give me strength. I am not what they say. I am yours." Her grandmother's words echoed in her heart. "Child, when they treat you as invisible, remember that heaven sees everything." She carried the tray back toward the kitchen, her shoulders squared. A busboy, younger than her, whispered, "Don't let them get to you, Maya." She smiled softly. "I won't." But her eyes told the truth. It always got to her, even when she pretended otherwise. In the kitchen doorway, she paused, looking back at the ballroom. The chandeliers sparkled, the orchestra played, the guests sparkled even brighter. Yet in all that glitter, she felt the heavy truth. To them, she was invisible. A pair of hands, nothing more. But Maya knew something none of them did. Invisibility could also be freedom. Because when they didn't notice you, you could see everything. You could see the cracks, the truths behind the masks. And tonight, those cracks would widen. As she re-entered the hall with a fresh tray, her eyes caught Noah again, seated near the piano, his gaze lowered, his shoulders slumped, as though carrying a weight no one else could see. She recognized that silence. It was the silence of someone who longed to be seen. Maya pressed her lips together, a thought flickering in her heart. Maybe God brought me here tonight not just to serve. The night was still young, but already the invisible ones, the waitress and the forgotten son, were being drawn together by something greater than chandeliers, wealth, or arrogance. Something neither Victor nor his world could control. And as the music swelled, the story of the night shifted ever so slightly. The piano's melody drifted through the ballroom like a memory that refused to fade. Guests moved around it as if it were background noise. But to Noah, every note felt like a pulse reminding him he was alive, and reminding him how invisible he was. He sat near the edge of the room, watching the swirl of gowns and tuxedos. Everyone looked so free, so confident, so certain they belonged. Noah longed to feel that certainty even for just a moment. From where he sat, he could see his father across the hall, surrounded by a crowd of investors. Victor's laughter was loud, polished, the laughter of a man who owned the room. Every nod, every handshake, every glance was calculated. Noah had seen it his whole life. His father only shone when people were watching. But when the lights dimmed, when the doors closed, when it was just the two of them, the shine disappeared. Then Noah was nothing more than a reminder of failure, of imperfection, of everything Victor hated about weakness. A Langford doesn't stumble. A Langford doesn't cry. A Langford doesn't need help. Those words had been drilled into Noah since he was a boy. But the accident had rewritten them into a cruel irony. He needed help every day. And every day his father saw it as shame. Noah lowered his gaze, staring at his hands. Hands that wanted to move, to play, to create, but instead were trained to rest quietly, politely, so no one would stare too long. Around him, guests whispered, "That's the son?" "Yes, the one in the chair." Tragic, isn't it? At least the father's still a giant. Each word struck like glass against skin. Noah pretended not to hear. He smiled faintly, like someone who had practiced invisibility his whole life. And yet, inside, he screamed. He wanted to stand, to walk, to show them he was more than this chair. He wanted to be seen not as the accident, but as Noah Langford, a man with thoughts, desires, and music burning in his chest. He remembered being 12 before the accident, dancing in the living room with his mother, spinning clumsily to the same kind of piano music playing tonight. She had laughed, clapping her hands, telling him he was born with rhythm. "You've got music in your blood, Noah," she said. After she died and after the accident, the music didn't stop, but it had nowhere to go. His father never let it out. "Stop dreaming, Noah. Focus on what you can do. Sit. Smile. Don't embarrass me." The music lived inside, trapped. Noah blinked quickly, holding back the sting in his eyes. He couldn't cry here. Not where cameras flashed, not where his father's empire glittered. From the corner of the room, Maya watched him. She recognized that look, the look of someone who had been taught to shrink. It was the same look she had carried into every job interview, every shift, every night she'd been treated like furniture. She saw in Noah what she saw in herself, someone too valuable to be invisible. But the rest of the ballroom didn't care. To them, he was just the forgotten son, the shadow of a man who would never fit his father's legacy. Noah drew in a shaky breath, whispering words only he could hear. "God, please, just once, let me matter." The prayer vanished under the sound of laughter and glasses clinking. No one noticed it, except heaven, and Maya, who was watching more closely than anyone else. And somewhere, in the quiet rhythm of the piano, it felt as though the answer was already on its way. The night moved forward like a parade of wealth. Waiters glided with trays, laughter rolled across the room, and the chandeliers glittered as if the world beneath them had no shadows. But shadows lingered. One sat in a wheelchair near the piano. Another carried a silver tray, weaving quietly between tables. Maya had tried to ignore the scene earlier, the way Victor barked at his son, the way guests whispered about him as if he couldn't hear. But the image stayed with her. She couldn't stop glancing back at Noah. His posture was too familiar, the shoulders slightly curled, the head tilted down, the silence of someone who had learned to make himself small. She knew that silence. She lived in it. Carrying another tray of champagne flutes, Maya paused near the edge of the room where Noah sat. He was watching the pianist intently, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the armrest of his chair, as if his body remembered something his father had forbidden him to show. Her steps slowed. She stood there longer than a waitress should. Then, with a quiet decision, she turned toward him. "You love the piano, don't you?" Noah startled. People rarely spoke to him at these events, not unless they wanted to praise his father or offer pity. But her tone carried neither. It was simply human. I do," he admitted, his voice low. "My mother used to sing to this kind of music." "Then you're lucky," Maya said softly. "It's still with you." Music doesn't leave. He blinked, surprised. No one had ever said it like that before. The tray wobbled slightly in her hand, and Noah noticed. "You've been working all night," he said. "Do you ever get to stop?" Maya gave a half smile. "Not really. But that's life, isn't it? Some people dance, some people serve. Tonight I serve." She meant it lightly, but Noah's heart twisted, because he wanted to dance, and all his life he had been forced to sit. Maya saw his expression shift, and something inside her spoke. Maybe intuition, maybe God himself. She lowered the tray onto a nearby table, breaking the unspoken rule that waitresses should never pause. She crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. "What?" His voice trembled. "I think you're stronger than anyone in this room." The words struck him harder than any insult ever had, because no one, not even his father, had ever said that to him. Noah tried to smile, but his throat tightened. He looked away, blinking fast. Maya didn't press. She just stayed there, her presence calm, steady, like a light refusing to be dimmed. Then the band shifted songs. A gentle waltz filled the hall. Couples began to move toward the center, silk skirts sweeping, polished shoes gliding. The ballroom became a carousel of motion. Noah's eyes followed them with longing so deep it hurt. His fingers tapped again, faster this time, matching the beat. Maya noticed. Her heart skipped. She wanted to say something reckless. The thought frightened her, but it also felt right. She leaned closer. "Have you ever tried?" "Tried what?" he asked, confused. "To dance." Noah froze. His breath caught. For a second, he thought she was mocking him, like the cruel boys in high school who had once laughed at his limp. But her eyes were steady, warm, honest. She meant it. "I can't," he whispered. "My father says it's impossible." Maya's lips curved into the faintest smile. Sometimes fathers are wrong. Her words lingered in the air, heavier than the music, brighter than the chandeliers. Noah stared at her, torn between disbelief and the small, stubborn spark that had never died inside him. For the first time that night, he felt seen, truly seen. And somewhere across the room, Victor Langford laughed loudly at another man's joke, completely unaware that his son's world had just shifted. The waltz swelled, filling the ballroom with an air of elegance. Dresses spun, shoes glided, and the chandeliers seemed to sparkle in rhythm with the music. Everywhere Noah looked, people were moving, freely, proudly, beautifully. And he sat still, the only one chained to silence. His hands trembled against the armrests. He wanted to look away, but his heart refused. He remembered what Maya had said only moments earlier. Sometimes fathers are wrong. The words echoed like a challenge. Maya stood nearby, her tray forgotten on a table. She watched Noah's eyes chase the dancers across the floor. She saw the longing hidden behind his careful composure, and she felt something rise inside her, bold, dangerous, but undeniable. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Do you want to?" Noah blinked. "Want to what?" "Dance." The word struck him like lightning. He froze. His chest tightened. I can't. Everyone's watching. They'll laugh." Maya's eyes softened, steady as sunlight. "Let them watch." Noah's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever dared suggest that he could stand in front of others, not as a burden, but as a man. "It's not possible," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Maya leaned in. "I believe it is. And I believe in you." The words sank into him deeper than any praise, deeper even than the applause his father had stolen for himself. Noah's throat tightened. He wanted to say no. He wanted to retreat into safety, into invisibility. But something stronger pulled at him, the part of him that had prayed earlier. "God, let me matter." Maybe this was the answer. Maya set her hand gently on his. It was warm, steady. Just one step, she said softly. We'll do it together. His heart pounded. He glanced around the room. No one was paying attention yet. They were too wrapped in their own twirls and laughter. But if he tried, if he failed, they would see. I don't want to fall, he whispered. Then I'll catch you. Her words were firm, unwavering, the kind of promise you only believe when it comes from someone who means it with their soul. Noah swallowed hard. Slowly, trembling, he reached for the control that guided his chair and switched it off. The quiet click sounded louder than the orchestra in his ears. Maya moved to his side, sliding the tray completely away. She extended her hand. Ready? He looked into her eyes, and for the first time in years he nodded. Maya slid one arm behind his back, the other guiding his hand. Noah shifted, every muscle in his body tense with fear and effort. His legs shook, his breath came sharp, but he pushed. Slowly, painfully, Noah rose. The room blurred around him, the chandeliers, the laughter, the polished marble. None of it mattered. What mattered was that he was standing. For the first time in years, he was standing. Maya's voice was steady in his ear. One step, Noah, just one. His leg trembled, his knee nearly buckled. But with her hand holding his, with her arm supporting him, he leaned forward. His foot moved. Just an inch, just a breath, but it moved. And in that moment, Noah felt it, the impossible turning into reality. Maya smiled, her eyes bright with pride. See? You're already dancing. Noah's chest tightened with emotion. He wanted to cry, but instead he laughed. A laugh broken by tears, but real. A laugh that sounded like freedom. But across the ballroom, someone had noticed. Victor Langford, in the middle of a conversation with the senator, froze when he saw the scene. His jaw tightened, his hand clenched around his glass. To him, this was not courage, this was humiliation. His son, stumbling, a waitress touching him, guests beginning to turn, whisper, point. The music went on, but the atmosphere began to shift. The act of courage had begun, and so had the storm. The orchestra's waltz continued, but something had shifted. A ripple moved across the ballroom, subtle at first, the way whispers pass like wind through tall grass. At the far end of the hall, Noah Langford was standing. For years, many of the guests had only known him as the son in the wheelchair, a shadow at the edge of his father's empire. Yet here he was, trembling, pale, but upright, his hand held by a waitress in a black uniform. One by one, conversations faltered. Laughter died mid-breath. A senator paused mid-toast, his glass hovering in the air. Even the pianist, though his fingers never left the keys, stole glances at the scene unfolding beside him. Maya stood firm at Noah's side, her hand steady on his. She whispered, just for him, breathe. One more step. Noah inhaled shakily. His knee threatened to give, but he pressed forward, clinging to her hand like it was the only anchor in the world. He lifted his foot again, slow, halting, and set it down. Another step. The ballroom gasped collectively, a soft sound, as though hundreds of lungs had agreed to breathe at once. Maya smiled at him, her eyes shimmering with encouragement. That's it. You're doing it. To Noah, the world blurred. He barely saw the wealthy men and jeweled women staring at him. He didn't see the flashes of cameras beginning to tilt his way. All he saw was her, the woman who refused to let him stay invisible. They moved together, step by trembling step, until it no longer looked like struggle, but rhythm. Awkward, yes, but rhythm nonetheless. And for the first time in his life, Noah Langford was not hiding. He was dancing. Some guests smiled softly, their faces touched with something they couldn't quite explain. Others exchanged sharp whispers. What is he doing? This is embarrassing. Does Victor know? At the center of the room, Victor Langford knew. His face darkened with each step his son took. He felt the eyes of the ballroom shifting from him. The empire, the billionaire, the man who owned the night. To Noah, the sun he had always tried to hide. It was intolerable. But for a brief, fragile moment, Noah didn't care. He felt weightless, as if years of silence and shame had lifted with every trembling movement. He could hear his mother's voice in the back of his memory. "You've got music in your blood, Noah." The music carried him now. Maya leaned closer, her voice steady and warm. "Look at them. They see you." Noah's lips trembled into the faintest smile. For the first time in years, the stares around him didn't feel like pity. They felt like recognition. Then, silence. The song ended, but the pianist didn't start another. The hall stood still, caught between awe and confusion. Glasses remained half-raised, conversations forgotten. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their light more softly. Every eye in the room was fixed on the pair, the billionaire's son, fragile yet defiant, and the waitress who dared to lift him from invisibility. It was beautiful. It was scandalous. And it was about to explode. The silence that filled the ballroom was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before a storm. All eyes had turned toward the fragile figure standing by the piano. Noah, trembling but upright, supported by the steady hand of Maya, the waitress who had dared to bring him to his feet. Whispers ran through the room like cracks in glass. "Is this real? Look at him. He's actually standing." With the waitress? How improper. Some faces glowed with awe, others twisted with disdain. But one face grew darker than all the rest, Victor Langford. The billionaire's smile, so carefully polished for cameras, had shattered. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. He had built an empire on control. Controlling numbers, controlling people, controlling his own image. And here, in the middle of his perfect evening, his son was breaking that control into pieces. And worse, it was happening with the help of a servant. Victor pushed past the crowd, his shoes striking the marble floor with sharp, angry clicks. Guests parted before him, their murmurs rising in anticipation of what would come. When he reached the piano, his voice cracked like thunder. "What is this?" The room froze again. Noah's breath hitched, fear flashing across his face. Maya tightened her grip on his hand, refusing to let go. Victor's eyes burned into her first. "You." His voice dripped with venom. "Do you think this is a stage for your little performance? You're here to serve drinks, not humiliate my family." Maya swallowed, her chest pounding, but her voice came steady. He wasn't humiliating anyone. He was dancing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever spoken to Victor Langford like that, especially not a waitress. Victor stepped closer, towering over her, his finger jabbed toward her chest. "You are finished. Fired. Do you hear me? You will never set foot in one of my events again." Maya's lips pressed together, but she didn't look away. Her silence was stronger than his rage. Then Victor turned on Noah. "And you?" His voice lowered, but the contempt in it was sharp enough to cut stone. "Do you have any idea how pathetic you looked? Stumbling, shaking, letting her parade you around like a circus act? You embarrassed me. You embarrassed this family." Noah's body shook, not just from weakness but from the weight of years of humiliation compressed into this single moment. His throat tightened, words clawing to come out, but for a second, fear still chained him. Victor, seeing his son's silence, sneered. "That's right, stay quiet, you're good at that." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, ashamed to watch. Others leaned in, hungry for scandal. Cameras, though discreet, began to flash from the corners of the room. Maya felt Noah trembling beside her. She leaned close, whispering so only he could hear. "Don't let him steal this from you. Not tonight." Her words struck like sparks to dry wood. Noah's breath deepened. His hands clenched the armrest of his chair as if gathering strength from the piano, from Maya, from God himself. Victor, sensing defiance, barked again. "Sit down, Noah, now, before you make an even bigger fool of yourself." But this time, Noah didn't obey. The silence stretched thin, fragile, ready to break. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. For the first time in his life, Noah Langford was about to answer his father. And when he did, nothing in the ballroom, or in their lives, would ever be the same. The air in the ballroom was suffocating. It wasn't just the glittering chandeliers or the perfume that hung heavy in the air. It was the silence, stretched tight as glass, threatening to shatter with the next word. Victor Langford stood tall, red with fury, his voice still echoing from the last command. "Sit down, Noah, now, before you make an even bigger fool of yourself." For 24 years, Noah had obeyed. Every command, every order, every cruel reminder of what he wasn't. He had been trained to lower his head, to fold his spirit, to disappear. But not tonight. Not after Maya's whisper. "Don't let him steal this from you. Not tonight." Noah's breath shook, but he didn't sit. He kept standing, knees trembling, chest tight, but eyes beginning to rise. The crowd waited, some with pity, some with curiosity, but all with anticipation. No one had ever heard Noah speak against his father. Noah swallowed hard. His voice cracked, soft at first, but enough to pierce the silence. "Father?" Victor's eyes narrowed, sharp as daggers. "Don't. Not here." But Noah didn't stop. Something inside him, long buried, was breaking free. "All my life," Noah's voice trembled, "you told me I was an embarrassment, that I was a shadow, that I should stay quiet so you could shine." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Guests leaned closer, cameras tilted discreetly. Noah's hands shook, but he pressed on. "You said I was weak, that I was a burden. But tonight," he glanced at Maya, her eyes steady on his. "Tonight I stood, and I danced." Maya's lips curved into the faintest, proudest smile. Victor's face turned darker, his teeth clenched. "Enough, Noah." But Noah raised his voice, stronger now, filled with years of silence turned into fire. "No, Father. Not enough. I am not ashamed of who I am. I am not your mistake. I am not invisible." The ballroom erupted into whispers. Some nodded, some stared wide-eyed. Victor stepped closer, towering, his voice low and venomous. "You dare humiliate me in front of all these people? You dare raise your voice against me?" Noah straightened as much as his fragile body allowed. His legs trembled, but his spirit stood taller than it ever had. "I'm not humiliating you. I'm freeing myself from you." The words struck like thunder. A hush fell again, deeper than before. Even the pianist had frozen, his fingers hovering above the keys. Noah's chest heaved, his face pale, but his voice carried steady now, as if heaven itself had lent him strength. "For the first time, I am not afraid of you." The room gasped. Some applauded softly, unable to hold it back. Others exchanged glances, shocked that the billionaire's son had just broken his chains in front of everyone. Maya squeezed his hand gently, her eyes glistening, and in that moment, it was no longer just about a young man confronting his father. It was about every soul in that room who had ever been silenced, diminished, or told they weren't enough. Noah had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same. For a moment, no one moved. The entire ballroom seemed suspended in time, the weight of Noah's words still echoing through the air. "For the first time, I am not afraid of you." The declaration had cracked something larger than Victor's pride. It had cracked the illusion that money and power were untouchable. Victor's face twisted with rage, his lips parted, ready to unleash another lash of venom, but before he could speak, it happened. A sound, soft, uncertain, but powerful enough to break the silence. Clapping. One pair of hands, then another, then another. Within seconds, applause swelled through the room. Guests who had moments ago whispered in judgment were now standing straighter, clapping louder, their expressions filled with something rare in a hall built on vanity. Respect. They weren't applauding Victor. They weren't applauding wealth. They were applauding courage. Maya felt Noah stiffen beside her, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. She whispered gently, "They see you now." Tears gathered at the corners of Noah's eyes, but for once they weren't born of shame. They were born of freedom. Across the crowd, some stood, raising their glasses. Others called out softly, "Bravo! That's strength. That's a man." Victor, however, stood frozen. The empire he had built on fear was crumbling in real time. He tried to bark over the applause. "Enough! Sit down, all of you." But the clapping grew louder, drowning him out. His voice, once the only sound that mattered in any room, was nothing against the roar of recognition for his son. The cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones, hidden until now, began to rise discreetly, capturing every second. The story was no longer Victor's carefully crafted legacy. It was Noah's moment of truth. Noah, still trembling on his feet, turned slowly, looking at the faces of strangers who had finally stopped seeing him as a shadow. His lips parted, and though his voice was weak, it carried. "Thank you." The applause thundered. Victor's hand slammed down on a table, rattling glasses. His face was red, his voice cracking. "Do you all not see? He's making a fool of himself. This is weakness and not strength." A guest near the front, an older woman, elegant but with eyes sharper than diamonds, spoke aloud, her voice cutting through the noise. "No, Mr. Langford. What we see is your weakness, and your son's strength." The crowd murmured in agreement. Victor's jaw dropped slightly. For perhaps the first time in decades he had been challenged, not by a competitor, not by the press, but by the truth reflected in the eyes of others. Maya's grip on Noah's hand tightened, her heart pounding. She knew what was happening wasn't just about a dance. It was about dignity reclaiming its place in a world that had tried to erase it. The applause finally softened, but the respect in the room remained. Guests leaned forward, their eyes no longer on Victor but on Noah, the son who had been forgotten, and who had now taught them all something greater than wealth. The lesson was clear. True greatness isn't in power, or in money, or in the empire a man builds. It is in the courage to stand even when standing seems impossible. Victor felt the truth press against him, heavy and suffocating. He could feel the empire of pride he had built for decades beginning to crumble, not under scandal, not under business rivals, but under the undeniable strength of his own son. And for the first time, Victor Langford wasn't the man everyone admired. He was the man everyone pitied. The applause faded slowly, like waves retreating from the shore, but the echo of it lingered in every corner of the ballroom. Noah still stood, fragile yet unbroken, his hand held firmly by Maya. The crowd's eyes shone with something Victor Langford had never inspired in them, genuine respect. Victor stood motionless, his chest heaving, his face pale beneath the weight of humiliation. For a man who had always controlled every room he entered, this moment felt like the collapse of an empire. He looked at his son, not the way he usually did, as a blemish, an inconvenience, but truly looked at him. For the first time, Victor saw what everyone else saw: courage. A young man who had risen despite the weight of his father's scorn. A son who had found his voice. The silence pressed on him, heavy. The words of the older woman from the crowd echoed, "No, Mr. Langford. What we see is your weakness, and your son's strength." Victor's throat tightened. His pride screamed at him to lash out again, to reclaim authority. But another voice, one he had long silenced, whispered instead, "This is the moment. Choose." For the first time in years, Victor felt small, and in that smallness he felt human. He stepped forward, his voice rough, broken. "Noah." Noah's eyes flickered with caution. He had heard that voice too many times as a weapon, but this time it trembled differently. Victor swallowed hard. "I was wrong." Gasps rustled through the crowd. The mighty Victor Langford, admitting fault? It seemed impossible. But the words kept coming, halting yet honest. "I spent my life building towers of glass, chasing power, chasing recognition, and in doing that, I buried the only thing that truly mattered. I buried you, son. I buried love." His voice cracked. He turned, his eyes glistening, toward Maya. "And I shamed you, in front of everyone. You showed my son more strength in one night than I gave him in 24 years. For that, I ask your forgiveness." Maya's eyes softened, though her body remained steady. "It's not me you need forgiveness from," she said gently, glancing at Noah. Victor's chest heaved. He turned back to his son, his empire of arrogance crumbling completely. "Noah, forgive me. I called you weak when you were stronger than I ever was. I called you a burden when you were my blessing. Tonight you taught me what real strength looks like. And I don't deserve it, but I beg you, forgive me." Noah's breath trembled. Tears blurred his vision. For so long he had prayed for this. Not the wealth, not the applause, but this. To be seen, to be loved. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. "I forgive you, Father." The room exhaled. Some guests wiped their eyes discreetly. Others clasped their hands as if they had just witnessed something holy. Victor lowered himself, sinking to one knee beside his son, the man who had once been his shame, now his greatest teacher. For the first time in his life, the billionaire bowed. And in that moment, Victor Langford's empire didn't look like the marble walls, the chandeliers, or the millions he owned. His empire was his son, alive, brave, and free. Maya squeezed Noah's hand gently, whispering, "You see? God doesn't abandon the just." Noah's smile trembled, his eyes shining. And for the first time he believed it. The pianist began to play again. Not for the billionaires, not for the cameras, but for them. A melody soft and reverent as if heaven itself had joined the music. And so under the same chandeliers that once lit arrogance, a new story was born. The story of a father humbled, a son restored, and a young woman whose courage reminded them all that true wealth is measured not in dollars but in dignity and love. Have you ever experienced something like this? Being treated as invisible and then finally recognized? Share in the comments. Do you believe that justice always comes sooner or later? Write your thoughts below. Never lose hope. Justice may take time, but it always comes. In the end, good always wins.